Moccasin Trail, Chapter 19. Under a bright mid-morning sun 3 days later, Jim, Jonathan, Dan'l, and Mr. Rutledge rode into the clearing beside the Tualatin. Meek and the others had already scattered for their own claims to spread the news that the boy was safely home. Johnny had shouted it at the top of his lungs as soon as they were in earshot of the cabin. Almost before he reined his horse to a halt, Sally was at his stirrup, laughing and crying at once as she pulled Dan'l down into her arms and held him as if she never meant to let him go. Mrs. Rutledge and the twins were only seconds behind her, and for a few moments the little runaway was all but smothered by the swirling skirts and joyous, tearful babble that surrounded him. Jim looked on silently, thinking by how slim a margin this scene had missed being one of tragedy. His paint was gone long since. His fringed shirt covered the bronze-scarred body of Tox alone. The medicine bundle no longer swung on his braid, but rested deep in the hidden darkness of his pouch. He was Jim Keith again, his face a little haggard from 3 days of wearing that savage throbbing down to a dull ache, but his mind more resolved than ever on what he knew he must do. He waited until Dan'l was well launched on a breathless recital of all that had happened in the past fearful week. Then he drew Johnny aside. "I'm leaving now," he said quietly. "You're doing what?" "I'm leaving. Tell Sally everything she said is true, and I know it. Tell her." "Why don't you tell her yourself?" Johnny said. "Thunder, I can't face her. She hates the sight of me." Jonathan was silent a moment. From the group around Dan'l, Sally's voice floated to them clearly. "I can just thank our stars for Jim, that's all. If it hadn't been for him—" "Don't sound much like she hates you," Johnny said. "You didn't hear her the other day when I first come back. She's dead right, too. Been better if you'd never seed me." "I don't feel that way about it." "Well, you oughta." "No, I oughtn't. Jim, looky here. You headed out of here last week for good and all. You know what you did. Yet you turned around and come back. Why? You tell me why." Jim thought of Laurel Hill and the new world he'd envisioned as he watched the wagons, of Tom dissolving wraith-like into the misty past, and himself riding joyously down the mountain toward a future he'd finally glimpsed. Johnny was making this mighty hard. There were things you couldn't explain, things you couldn't bear to talk about. "No use telling you why, Johnny. I just wanted to come back, and now I want to go." "You're lying. You don't want to go no more'n I do." Jim spoke desperately. "Never mind what I want. You seen what I done to the boy. I got to get out, go far away from him so he'll forget all about me. Looks to me like the only thing I can do." "Looks to me," Johnny said slowly, "like running away again." Jim shook his head violently, his thoughts in a tangle, his whole will concentrated on hanging on to that one clear decision. "I'm going, that's all," he muttered, and turned away. But Johnny caught his arm. "All right," he snapped, "but you ain't going to go without telling Dan'l. Not again, you ain't." Before Jim could stop him, he raised his voice. "Dan'l, come over here. Jim's got something to say to you." Dan'l detached himself from the group around him and ran eagerly across the grass. Then he was standing there, waiting, and Jim had to say something. "Dan'l," he began, half choking on it. He looked down into the snub-nosed, inquisitive, small face with its wide, clear eyes, and knew he had to make him understand the whole thing once and for all. He dropped down on his haunches before the boy, seizing his shoulders. "Dan'l, you ain't ever going to run away again," he said, softly, fiercely. "You understand that? You're going to forget everything I ever told you about the crows and Absaroka and all the rest." "Forget it? Why?" "'Cause it ain't got nothing to do with you. This here's your home, this valley. They's big things happening here, Powerful big things, Dan'l. And you gonna be in on 'em. Jim, what'd you mean? I mean you mustn't ever want to be an Injun anymore. By gor, it ruined me, but it ain't gonna ruin you. It's folks like you who's gonna make the country over. You know that? I seen it happening the other day right before my eyes. Up on the mountain. He told the boy about Laurel Hill, about wagons plunging down. He'd forgotten Johnny and the others now. He thought only of the thing he'd glimpsed and the terrible importance of making Dan'l see it. The boy's eyes darkened with interest as he listened, but they were bewildered too. Well, shucks. Just getting some old wagons down a hill, that ain't so much. It ain't half as much as what you done t'other night, sneaking me away from them umpquaws and up the bank. Oh, thunder, it ain't the same at all. Why ain't it? You're as brave as them, lots braver. Jim gave him a frantic little shake. Now listen. You gotta listen to me. You're gonna change all of them ideas. Them wagons'll be over the plains afore we know it. Look at the folks in this valley already. Why, they be plowing fields in Absaroka. They'll be building schools and towns. I don't care about all that, cried Dan'l. I only want to be like you. The wide eyes swept over Jim's braids and feather. You didn't change. You're just the same, and I'm going to be just like you. Jim's hands slid from the boy's shoulders as he slowly straightened, looking down into a small, inflexible face whose expression of stubbornness he remembered all too well from that snowy evening high above the gorge. Jim turned slowly to Johnny. So that's what you meant, he thought. He won't believe me less'n I prove it. I got him into this, and now I gotta get him out. I can't run away and leave him to fight by hisself. The rough way, the way I done. I gotta stay and show him. He looked again at Dan'l. All right, he said. Then go ahead and be like me. Here's how I'm gonna be. With a swift motion, he had his knife out. Then he seized one braid, one ruthless slash, and it dropped, slithering and glossy at his feet. An instant later, the other followed. He snatched the coup feather out of his hair and flung it down beside the braids. Then he stood there, breathing hard and shaking, everything in him in an uproar at what he'd done. Take a thunderin' good look, he said. That's the last you'll see of a crow around here, this claim. Now go on in the cabin and get some sleep. I've had my say. Slowly, Dan'l obeyed, moving away toward the cabin like one in a dream. For the first time, Jim became aware of the others. He didn't meet their gaze, not even Johnny's. Reaction had set in now. He couldn't stand to look at what lay at his feet. He had done the right thing for Dan'l. But what of himself? Of his helpers? Suddenly, Sally darted forward and scooped the braid and feathers into her arms and whirled toward the cabin. Hold on, Jim grated. Why are you taking them? Slowly, she turned back. I'm going to put 'em where they belong, she told him softly. The braid's in the leather box, so's we'll always remember 'em, and the feather, under the clock, with Pa's medal. The understanding in her voice, the strange, weightless feeling of his slashed-off hair, it was too much for him to handle. He turned blindly and headed for the woods. It was all right. He need not leave the valley now. He could stay with his own people, and still. He knew only that he must be alone for a while, to straighten the whole thing out and get a hold of himself. Johnny, searching cautiously through the willows upstream 10 minutes later, spotted him, sitting on a flat stone by the water's edge, his head in his hands. Johnny hesitated, touched by the weariness in the pose and by the shorn black locks, which parted themselves sleekly down the back of Jim's head as if the braid were still there. What had they meant to him, Johnny wondered. Something far deeper than anyone had guessed, until the moment he had slashed them from his head. That was a moment Johnny knew he would not forget, nor would any of them who had seen it. Jim had heard him and turned. Want me to leave you be? Said Jonathan. It don't matter. Come on. Johnny went on, but stopped abruptly as he reached Jim's side. Jim was holding that little heathen buckskin sack. "Want to talk about it?" Johnny asked. Jim shrugged. "I'm just trying to figure out where this comes in. It's the only thing left," he said desperately, "but it's the biggest thing of all." Johnny sat down very quietly beside him. "Jim, what is that?" Jim hesitated as if crossing some final inward barrier. But at last he spoke. "It's my medicine, Johnny. It's the only luck I got, and it's powerful strong. It's saved my hide 100 times, and even brought me here. But it's crow medicine. It won't know me or help me now. By Gor, I don't know what to do without it." Johnny sat rigid. "Oh, Lord Almighty," he thought. "We changed him all we could, but inside he's just the same. He's still an Injun." "It brought you here?" he repeated cautiously. "The song did. My medicine song. It was in my dream." Then the whole thing came out, piece by piece, and haltingly. It was hard for Jim to tell this. Johnny could see that. It was deep and private, locked away securely in Jim's Indian heart, and only brought out now because the very foundations of his life were being shaken. Johnny tried to be worthy of his trust, not letting his feelings show, keeping his pity and scorn and helpless anger all to himself. But as the tale went on, as Jim quit explaining what medicine dreams were and began to describe his own, Jonathan's anger faded and astonishment filled his mind instead. "You spoke English to that grizzly?" he broke in softly. "When you was a crow, 3 year already you dreamed in white man's talk?" Jim nodded, his hands tight on the bundle. "I don't know whar I knew them words, Johnny. Seems like it was mighty long ago. The Lord is my shepherd. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. Though I walk through the—" Johnny was on his feet, shouting with relief and joy. "Oh, criminy, Jim! Oh, Lord Almighty, I know where you knew him. I know all about it. I thought you was really Injun clean through." Jim slowly rose to his feet to face him. "What are you talking about?" "About them words, Jim. It's all so blasted simple now." Jonathan broke off, fighting to calm himself. He pulled Jim down again upon the stone. "Now listen," he said quietly, trying to keep his voice from trembling. "I'm going to say 'em to you, and say 'em right. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you art with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." The words hung still in the air, vibrant with beauty and courage. "That's your medicine, Jim," Johnny said softly. "The Bible, the 23rd Psalm. Mother always read it to us when we was sick, remember? That's why you thought of it in that dream. You was sick then, feverish from starving and cutting yourself with that knife. That's all a medicine dream is, from where I sit, Jim. A nightmare. You had yours about that grizzly, and it ain't no wonder. But what they was Injun about it, you could put in your eye. It's been a white man. You've been a white man all along, clean through." Jim sat silent. Then, deliberately, he ripped open the buckskin bundle in his hands, and with a gesture of revulsion, flung the whole thing on the ground. The late afternoon sun was slanting through the shallows before Jim straightened his cramped legs and stood up, aware once more of his surroundings, and that it was time to go home. He was ready now. The afternoon had been like a miracle, illuminating the last dark corners of his mind. He had never felt so free, so completely without fear. The future rose, glowing before him. He would teach Dan'l how to shoot and ride. He He would plow and reap and work with Johnny, ride the length and breadth of the valley, hunting wolves, whenever Joe Meek called, and hoped it was often. He grew warm with pride when he thought of the shining brass badge, the valley looking to him for law and protection. Nothing could touch him now. The tangles were ended. He and Johnny had talked over every plan and hope and optimistic dream. He was supremely confident that they would all come true. Never again would Absaroka cross his mind. He'd forget it completely. He stared down at the scattered grisly teeth, in spite of himself, seeing the thin brown line of horses and Indians file over the hills, seeing the hidden streams and the birch thickets where the deer played, and the copper-brown faces of the brave men he'd grown up worshiping as heroes. Then Johnny's hand reached down, gathered the scattered teeth and the piece of buckskin, and tucked them into his pocket. "I reckon," said Johnny, "these ought to go in that leather box, too, so's we'll always remember 'em. Them Injuns wasn't so bad, Jim. Look what they done for you. Made you fast and strong and brave, mighty brave. The medicine even brought you back home. We don't want to forget 'em. Johnny, I could never anyhow." "I know. I seen you trying. Don't try." Jim nodded. Here was the closeness he and Johnny had known so long ago, regained at last, and deeper than ever. Once again, they knew each other's heart. He smiled, realizing the phrase had come to his mind in Crow. No matter. It was good that way. He drew a deep breath and started cabinward, then turned back, brushing awkwardly at his hair. It felt so strange, chopped off like this, hanging over his cheeks. He frowned and studied Johnny's, then moved past him to the riverbank. Kneeling, he scooped up water and wet the dangling locks, clawing it back over his ears with his fingers. When he arose with a somewhat sheepish grin, he turned to be inspected. Johnny's laugh was good to hear. "By golly, if that don't make a difference. You know something? We look alike again." They pushed on through the willows, climbing the path to the clearing and walking slowly, happily up the sloping grass. Yonder, across the glades, sun was setting. The woods showed black against a brilliant sky, but more brilliant by far, in Jim's eyes, was the yellow oblong of the doorway, just ahead of him. There were no ghosts remaining in that cabin now, no memories he could not face. All was settled and at peace. He swept one lingering glance over the woods, the whispering river, all the riches that were his, then followed his brother through that lighted door. Jim Keith had come back home again, at last. The end.